Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to BGO Traders. My name is Taryn, and this is green-white aggro for Rivals of Ixalan Standard. I know I've kind of gone over a lot of aggro lists in the format so far in Rivals of Ixalan, but there are so many great creature-based strategies in the format that I just think it's worth talking about. Obviously, if you guys didn't see, red-green aggro, or red-green monsters rather, took GP Memphis over the weekend, and I really wanted to kind of cover that today, but I didn't want to just kind of do an exact list. So instead of doing red-green, I decided to do green-white, which is very similar in different ways, and not in other ways, of course, and do that one today. But of course, before we get into it, make sure to like the video. If you like the video, helps that a lot, helps keep the channel going. We're so close to 10,000 subscribers. Would really appreciate you guys subscribing and getting us over that mark. Oh, by the way, of course, I dyed my hair. If this is a new video, you guys haven't seen it yet. You know, I've gone kind of Super Saiyan, so just, yeah, deal with it. So without further ado, let's get right into the deck list here. We have a 4 of 1 mana Sacred Cat. It is a 1/1 cat with lifelink, and of course Embalm with 1 white mana, which means we can be a good blocker, get us some good early life gain, and come back as a 1/1 as well in the mid to late game too. Next up here we have 4 Adanto Vanguard, possibly one of the best white creatures in the entire format at the moment. A 4 of 2 mana 1/1 Vampire Soldier. As long as Adanto Vampire is attacking, it gets +2/+0, and you can pay for life. Adanto Vanguard gains indestructible until end of turn. Very, very good at being able to block, and of course being able to trade or trade up against a creature. Again, I just said this, but I feel like Adanto Vanguard is probably one of the best white creatures in the format. It just does so much for us. It's very hard to deal with a Fatal Push or a Lightning Strike or something like that, or a Braid. An opponent's going to need a -1 or -1 counter to be placed on an Adanto Vanguard to kill it, or they just have to Vraska's Contempt it, which is crazy, casting a 4 mana spell to kill a 2 mana creature. That's just insane. Moving on to another cat for us, we have Adorned Pouncer. This is a 4 of 2 mana 1/1 cat with Double Strike and Eternalize, which is what makes this really spicy, for 5 mana, which means it comes back as a 4/4 Double Striker zombie cat, which is ridiculous. Adorned Pouncer by itself with pump spells can be a hard to deal with creature, but an Adorned Pouncer that is Eternalized with being a 4/4 and having Double Strike is just really hard to deal with from our opponent's perspective. Adorned Pouncer is a card that if they use removal on it, it has to be a Magma Spray, and if they don't, it's going to go to the graveyard and come back in the mid to late game. Moving up here to some more cards, we have a 4 of 2 mana 2/1 Merfolk Branchwalker. This is a Merfolk Scout that when it enters the battlefield, we get to explore, which of course that means we look at the top card of our library, put that card into our hand if it's a land, otherwise put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, and then put that card on the top or put it into the graveyard if you want to. Now, if you guys are noticing a trend here, we have Adorned Pouncer here, and we also have Sacred Cat. These cards can actually come back from the graveyard thanks to something like a Branchwalker being pitching it to a graveyard. So we've got this nice synergy here of, well, if we need it, we get it into our hand. If we don't, we pitch it to the graveyard and we Eternalize it or Embalm it later. That means that this turns into a 3/2 if we do have the ability to do that, or it's just a 2/1 that does give us a land, which is nice. It's basically a free draw, and that's always good. Moving up here for another great card for Eternalize is 4 Resilient Kinra, a 2 mana 2/2 Jackal Wizard that when it enters the battlefield, you may have target creature get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is Resilient Kinra's power, and Eternalize for 6 mana, making it come back as a 4/4, and of course the same ability applies, giving +4/+4 to a creature on our side of the field. A turn 2 play with Resilient Kinra usually means an opponent's going to want to kill it as soon as possible if we have a Sacred Cat on the battlefield, because that's 3 lifelink points, and that's a lot in the early game, so they may want to kill Resilient Kinra, or they may want to kill the Sacred Cat as soon as that hits, or this is cast, rather. And if a Resilient Kinra is on the battlefield, they want to use a Magma Spray to make sure it does not hit the bin as well. So you're probably going to see a lot of Vraska's Contempts heading the way towards Resilient Kinra. Again, it's a very good card for us to be able to continue out our advantage and continue out pumping up our creatures until the game is over. But that is it for 2 drops. Let's go to 3 drops really quick. We have 4 Jadelight Ranger, a 3 mana 2/1 Merfolk Scout, and when Jadelight Ranger enters the battlefield, it explores, then it explores again, basically being Merfolk Branchwalker, but it just explores a second time, which gives us the opportunity to make this a possible 4/3 or just a 3/2 that actually draws us a land and maybe pitches a Resilient Kinra or an Adorned Pouncer to the graveyard. It feeds both things in doing that, which is very, very good for us, and of course Jadelight Ranger can also be a great blocker on the play too. Either way, I really like Jadelight Ranger being a 4 of here. The double green mana is kind of hard to deal with, but just being in a 2-color deck like this, I think will be fine. And the last 2 cards in here that are creatures, we have 2 Ronas the Indomitable. This is a 3 mana 5/5 legendary god with Death Touch, indestructible, and of course Ronas the Indomitable can't attack or block unless you control another creature with power 4 or greater. So eternalized creatures, that's basically what I'm getting at. We can pay 3, another target creature gets +2/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. So if we have a Sacred Cat and we have 6 mana open, we can actually make a Sacred Cat a 5/1, which is ridiculous, and have it gain trample, which is 5/1, like lifelink damage as well as trample damage. So that also does turn on Ronas too, and that's the reason we want to do that. But more often than not, we're going to have a 2/2 on the battlefield, just pay 3 mana, make it a 4/2, and then turn on Ronas and then attack out with those 2 creatures. One of the only cards that can really deal with Ronas right now is Battle the Bridge, and of course Vraska's Contempt. So Ronas is going to be hard to deal with creature, and having Death Touch is a plus as well. But that is all the creatures in the deck here. We have 26 in total. Let's move on to spells here. We have 3 Blossoming Defense. Because there is a lot of early game removal like a Fatal Push, Lightning Strike, a Braid, things like that, we want to make sure a Blossoming Defense is here to hopefully protect us against a Magma Spray or something like that that exiles our creatures, or a Vraska's Contempt in the mid to late game to make sure, again, that our creatures do not get exiled. So exiling is bad. Dying is really not that bad for us. Blossoming Defense also does have the upside of giving us +2/+2, meaning that if our opponent is attacking us, we can actually pump one of our creatures, or maybe even end a game by plussing up an Adorned Pouncer that's a 4/4, or even a 1/1, turning into a 3/3 double striker, hitting for 6 points of damage. That's crazy. Speaking of pump spells, another great one for us is 4 Appeal to Authority here. So it is a 1 green mana sorcery. Until end of turn, target creature you control gets trample and +X/+X for each number of creatures on the battlefield that you control. And when it goes to the graveyard, it has authority for 2 mana here as well. And then as Aftermath, of course, tap up to 2 target creatures your opponents control. Creatures you control gain Vigilance until end of turn. So this is going to be the card that's basically going to end the match for us. Hopefully going to be the last card we play until we get a game win. If not, it can make blocks really difficult for our opponent. And of course, it makes it so our creatures have Vigilance, so that does mean we have blocks available to us in the following turn. Appeal to Authority is one of those cards that's I am surprised now in retrospect that it is an uncommon and not a rare. The last 4 cards in here besides lands are just removal. We have 4 Cast Out. It is a 4 mana enchantment with flash, and when cast enters the battlefield, exile target non-land an opponent controls until Cast Out leaves the battlefield, and cycling for 1 white mana. Cast Out is really here to deal with a Scarab God, here to deal with a Glorybringer, here to deal with a large threat that hits the battlefield like a Rekindling Phoenix that we really can't deal with in the early game, but we can deal with in the mid to late game. And if we draw into too many Cast Outs, we can of course cycle it away for just 1 white mana. But that is all the cards in the deck besides lands here. Let's go over lands real quick. We have 4 Sunpetal Grove. This is a buddy land for us, tapping for green or white if we control a plains or a forest on the battlefield. We also have Scattered Grove, a 4/4 here. I did think that maybe reducing this would have been a good idea, but I do think having a full playset here is really good for the Sunpetal Grove, as well as being a cycling outlet for us. It enters the battlefield tapped, and of course we can pay 2 colors, and it cycles, which means we can discard it and draw a new card. Then we have 4 Sheffet Dunes, a great way to end a match. We are going to go kind of wide with cards that get to come back from the graveyard. And we also have cards like Hashep Oasis in the sideboard here as well, making sure that our creatures are pumped up and can get through some huge amounts of damage. And the last cards in the deck are of course 4 plains and 5 forests, and that is the full 60 in the game 1 game plan. So turn 1, go for a Sacred Cat. Turn 2, go for a Danto Vanguard or an Adorned Pouncer, maybe even a Merfolk Branchwalker. Turn 3, go for Resilient Kindred, hopefully attack out with something. Turn 4, go for a Jadelight Ranger or a Ronas, and then just continue to press an advantage until our opponent is giving us the nice old GG. But what can we do against control? What can we do against a lot of heavy removal? What can we do against something like Mardu Vehicles or a lot of heavy artifacts? Let's go to the sideboard here. We have 3 Naturalize. This is a 2 mana instant, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Very simple, very straightforward. That's going to help deal with a Cast Out, help deal with the Ixalan's Binding, and help deal with maybe even the one-off curse deck you're going to run into at your local F&M. Next up here we have 2 Deathgorge Scavenger. Great card for some recursion if they have stuff in the graveyard we don't like. So it's a 3 mana 3/2 dinosaur. When Deathgorge Scavenger enters a battlefield or attacks, you may exile target card from a graveyard that is ours or our opponent's. If it's a creature card exiled this way, we gain 2 life, which is great against a mono red aggro strategy. If a non-creature card is exiled this way, Deathgorge Scavenger gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So it turns into a 4/3, being able to attack out after it is played the following turn. Either way, Deathgorge Scavenger in the standard format is a blowout against certain strategies, especially a Godforce Gift strategy, or especially against a mono red aggro strategy, grabbing those Earthshaker Kinras to make sure they don't come back from the graveyard as 4/4s with haste. We definitely do not want that happening, so Deathgorge Scavenger is in the sideboard for that. Next up here we have 2 Sunscourge Champions. So again, against that aggro strategy, we want to gain some life. This is the way to do it. This is a 3 mana 2/3 human wizard. When Sunscourge Champion enters the battlefield, you gain life equal to its power, and you can eternalize it for 4 and discard a card, being it comes in as a 4/4, and we gain 4 life from that as well. So Sunscourge Champion, a great way to gain life in the sideboard too. Next up here we have 2 Thopter Rest. So we do have 4 Cast Out in the main board, but if we need a little bit more removal, Thopter Rest is here to help us. It is a 3-mana enchantment. When Thopter Rest enters a battlefield, exile target artifact or creature an opponent controls until Thopter Rest leaves the battlefield. Perfect. Very straightforward, very simple, and it can grab artifacts like a Godforsaken Gift or even a Heart of Kieran, something like that we don't like. A flyer's gonna be hard to deal with, and if it's a Heart of Kieran, we can definitely grab it with a Thopter Arrest. Next up here, we have 2 Gideon's Intervention. This is kind of here just to represent like the really fast decks, like a Rekindling Phoenix, and we don't have 2 kind of skill spells, or we can't exile with a cast out. Gideon's Intervention is here just to shut it down completely, so it can only be blocking, or it can only be blocked, and that is it. It's a 4-mana enchantment. As Gideon's Intervention enters the battlefield, choose a card name. Your opponent can't cast spells with a chosen name, which is great at shutting down like a Godforsaken Gift or a Refurbish, something like that. Or we can prevent all damage that would be dealt to you and permanents you control by the source of the chosen name. So if it's a creature, we can actually shut it down completely and make sure that it is just blocking, and that's it. Well, Gideon's Intervention is 4 mana, and that's kind of awkward. There are not very many options against an opponent that has a lot of like good creature or enchantment removal in game 2, and that's a good reason to bring in Gideon's Intervention. Next up here, we have 2 Settle the Wreckage, a 4-mana instant. Exile all attacking creatures target player controls. That player may search his or her library for that many basic lands, put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle his or her library. So Settle the Wreckage is really here against that mono red aggro strategy, or against a strategy that's going to go all the out and go for that alpha strike to close out a game. We're going to have Settle the Wreckage in our hand and hopefully get a huge blowout against our opponent and hopefully regain some of that momentum that we've lost. And against those control strategies, you know it's going to be in here. We have 2 Carnage Tyrant, a 6-mana 7/6 dinosaur that can't be countered with Trample and Hexproof. I wish that this had reach. It looks like the creature would have reach because of how big it is, but it does not, which is very, very sad. We do have a giant weakness in the deck, and that is flying creatures. So we do have to bring in Thopter Arrests, and of course cards like Deathgorge Scavenger to hopefully gain some life for those kind of flying matchups. But other than that, that is the full 75, and let's go to the layout here. On MTGO, Traders is coming to about 62 tickets, which is not bad at all, and in paper it's coming to about 133 bucks. The biggest pieces here, of course, are Jade Light Ranger, which is jumping in price thanks to green-red monsters, Adorn Pouncer, which is about 5 bucks for the playset, and Sheffet Dunes, which is about 4 bucks as well. Carnage Tyrant is also, I would say, the most expensive in the sideboard, being 25 bucks, or 25 tickets for just 2. But if you're not a fan of Carnage Tyrant, you can always bring in the Prowling Sepopert instead, because that does mean that your follow-up creatures do not get countered too, which is very good. But that is the full 75, guys. Let me know what you think. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you have any suggestions for it? Leave them in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts on the deck. I do think green-white aggro has a place in the format, in the meta, and I do think that this particular deck list has some huge potential to be a great blowout. But leave a like if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys on stream or the next video. Peace.